All right, hello everybody, and welcome. My name is Steven Kreutzfeldt, and I am a pre-sales engineer here with CDI, and I'm going to be your host for today's consulting webinar around forms, routing for multiple approvers. So starting right off, what is a build-along? Well, a build-along is an interactive experience designed to guide the viewer through the creation and deployment of a common business process. Today's process is going to center around Laserfiche forms and how we can dynamically route forms process to multiple approvers based on different circumstances and criteria. If at any point you have questions, please post those into the chat box, or rather into the questions box on the little floating GoToWebinar box. At the end of the webinar, I'll go ahead and go through each one of those and answer as many of them as I can. Tips for success. To get the most out of this, take good notes. I'm a big fan of screenshots. Take screenshots. Don't be afraid to post those questions into the questions box. Please complete the survey afterwards. We do go through that feedback. And know that this is going to be recorded and individual sessions are available. Once this is recorded, it'll be available on our YouTube channel in about 48 hours or so, definitely by next week. And anyone at CDI can get you that link at any time as well. So today's process, forms routing for multiple approvers. The intended audience is going to be Laserfiche admins and more intermediate Laserfiche users. I'll expect you to have some experience with Laserfiche and some experience with forms going into this. We'll need access to, and this is actually a little misleading. I'm going to talk about LFDS, which is the license manager piece of Laserfiche, but we won't actually be going into it. We will be using Laserfiche forms heavily, and we may go into the Laserfiche repository. I'm not sure yet, but we will at least be referencing that as well. To help you follow along, I'm going to begin with a demo of a solution that uses multiple approvers, multiple routing steps, so you can see the end product first. And then we'll go through and start building it from the beginning. So we'll start with the forms designer. I'll show you how we put that form together. And then we'll finish by setting up those different routing steps and those rules so you can see how we create dynamic routing in forms. Now, I'm not a big fan of slides. Those of you who have attended these before know that, but this one is necessary, and I promise you it's the only one. When we're routing forms through for different approvers, we're using different gateways. And it's important to differentiate between the different types of gateways in Laserfiche forms. The first one is going to be an exclusive gateway. Exclusive means one path. That means that it can have several different branches coming off of it, but it will only be routed to one user or go down one pathway. So exclusive means one. Inclusive means multiple paths, meaning that these two could look relatively identical, but this one will allow it to go down multiple paths. And this is actually the one that we're going to be using today. It's going to be the inclusive gateway. And then the last one is parallel gateway. Parallel means all. So if a form is submitted and we want it to go to several different approvers, 3 or 4, all of them, no matter what, that's when you would want to use a parallel gateway. Send it down all those paths at once. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. You'll notice that I'm going to be using the cloud client, and that's simply just because it's a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. However, I'm not going to be showcasing any functionality that isn't in your on-premise Laserfiche forms if you're using it on-prem. One thing I want to begin with, though, I mentioned I was going to talk about LFDS and licensing. There's 2 different licenses available with Laserfiche forms, and that is a full license and a participant license. Full license, you will need to actually design these forms, but in order to simply submit one or have a form routed to you for approval, you just need to have that participant license available. But you will need that at the very minimum. So if you want to be able to route a form to somebody and have them click yes, approve, or no, reject, or to send it on through, they will need to have a participant license. So what we have here is just the diagram of the form that's going to show multiple approvers. I'm using some random names of some musicians, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And what we're going to be seeing is when a form is submitted, we can select multiple approvers, and based on that information, it's going to go to one or multiple of these approvers, and they can either approve it or reject it. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. You'll notice this is a very, very simple form. It's just a series of checkboxes. You don't have to use checkboxes to dynamically route this, as I'll show in more detail as we move on. But in this case, for this example, we're going to say John and Paul need to approve this form, and we'll hit submit. Once submitted, I'm having these routes myself, but each one of them would get a notification, and they'd be able to see that form task in their forms inbox. We can also set it up so emails come in. In the Laserfiche cloud, you get a little notification up here in the right-hand corner. So you'll see that based on those two selections I made, one went to Paul and one went to John. So those were the two routing steps. So submitted the form, it went to our inclusive gateway, meaning multiple paths, but not all, and it went to these two. Now, to finish this out, you'll notice I've got another inclusive gateway down here. I want it to be set up that it's not going to go for final approval down here until both of these individuals have approved it, and that's why I bookend it with another exclusive gateway. So let's select our task, and we're just going to say yes, approve, and then we have our other task for John, and we're going to go ahead and say yes, approve. So then if we click out of this, you'll see that I have another notification. That's because both of these approvals took place, so now it can pass through this inclusive gateway onto the final approval. So final approval assigns me, go in, say yes, great, click the button for approve, yes, good, and then we'll probably have a new notification if this refreshes to show that the process, multiple approvals, was completed. And that's just the name of this process, multiple approvers. So what we saw happen there was some sort of variable that said go down these specific paths for these individuals to approve this, and then once everyone has approved it, move on. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So let's go ahead and just create a new form. That way you can see what this looks like from beginning to end. Once again, I understand my interface is going to look a little bit different from yours. The way that most of you will be accessing forms is through a URL. It is a web application, and that would be https:// name of the server where forms is located, and your IT could have that information if you don't have it, and then /forms. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to create a new business process. When you open up forms for the first time, you'll notice that there's a couple different options here. Blank process with nothing on it. Form submission is going to be the most common, and that's what I usually start with. That's just saying that when a form is filled out and submitted, that's what's going to kick it off. And then you can also import forms processes. So if you want to share with the Laserfiche community, that's a possibility. There's also the business process library. There are actually many different forms processes out there that already exist where you can just select them, download them, and import them. And of course, they won't be necessarily tailored to your organization, but it'll give you a leg up and a head start. It'll have a lot of the common fields already in place. You'll notice those are sorted by industry, sorted by category, so HR, accounting, higher education, manufacturing, etc. So sometime maybe go through some of those, see if there's anything that catches your eye. We've done a couple of videos on some of these canned out of the box processes, and those are available on the CDI YouTube channel as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do a form submission. We're just going to call this the March Consulting webinar. If you are relatively new to forms, I always talk about how there's two sides to this coin. There's the form itself, and then there's the mapping and business process. This is where we would start creating and mapping the process, meaning which paths are we going to go down, where is it going to be routed after it's submitted, what happens next. And I always build the form first, mostly because I need to have the variables already in place so I can start routing it, that needs to exist first. So we're going to go to my starting form. And from here, I always like to start with the form settings, only because I am very particular about these types of things. I want my form to be called what I want it to be something descriptive, so I know which form I'm working with. Otherwise, it's just going to be starting form. So we're going to call this multiple approver test. You can leave this as is. The maximum width is usually pretty close, but you can expand it here. And I just like the way it looks when the alignment or the labels are on top instead of to the left. I think it just looks a little bit nicer and lays it out a little bit better. You'll also notice that it can be optimized for form layout on mobile devices. Because this is a web interface, that means that you can actually have forms routed to you on your mobile device if you have Forms Mobile or Laserfiche Mobile, and actually do those approvals from your mobile device. We can also give it a title, say multiple approvers, and done. And then we have all of our different field types on the left, and this is all just drag and drop. It's very easy to build a form. This was probably one of the most fun parts of Laserfiche, in my opinion, to learn. We use checkboxes on the other one, so we'll go ahead and continue to use that. Let's just say, who needs to sign this? Question mark. So that's what the label is going to be. The variable will automatically populate. The variable is going to be important because that's how the system actually recognizes which field is which. You may have a very long form with multiple first name fields. The variable is what differentiates those. You can put whatever you want in here to differentiate it on your own, or if you just leave it alone, it'll create it automatically based on the label of the field. So it'll be like who underscore needs underscore, et cetera, et cetera. We can add text below and above fields if we want, or text rather, but not necessary. And then we can add our different choices. And let's just use Jim, Michael, and Dwight. And save. If at any point you want to see what your form looks like, you can go up to the little eye, and that'll give you a preview of what your form looks like. I chose checkboxes because checkboxes allow you to have multiple checks. And conversely, you could use radio buttons that allow you to have only one option. That's the key difference between those two. But either way, it's going to allow us to go down multiple branches based on these criteria. So let's just leave it with this. This is very simple, but this will be a good start. And I'll show you how you can then build upon this. So I'm going to go back to my business process here. And I always work left to right. First thing I also do usually is just take this out. You do need to know that in order for a forms process to complete, it will need to have a beginning and an end, as everything does. So eventually we need to connect the dots somehow to get to this, otherwise it's going to fail. It won't even let you run it. So the first event, you'll notice there are multiple here. It can be started on a timer. It can be started by an error. So if an error happens here, it can kick off another forms process. But message start event is the one that's going to be the most common. That's saying that when the form is submitted or filled out and they hit submit, that's what starts this whole process. So we'll want to go in here and make sure that the starting form is, excuse me, the multiple approver test. We'll need to know which form is the starting form. That one's correct. So we're good there. So the next step is going to be, where does it go once it's submitted? Well, somebody's going to need to approve this, but it can be multiple. So which one of these gateways is multiple? That's right, inclusive. Usually when I start an inclusive gateway and I know that it's going to finish up when everybody has already gone through the approvers, I'll just bookend it. I'll pick the exact same one. So that way I have both of them in place. I know what I need to end with. So I'll just create two inclusive gateways, one at one end and one at the other. The next piece is how many users are there possibly to actually route to. There's going to be 3, so I'm just going to add 3 user tasks. The user tasks mean route to individual. You'll notice there's a couple of other tasks down here as well. A common one would be like an email service task. That's just saying send an email notification to somebody. We also have the save to repository. That's probably the most common end, that once the form is completed, maybe there's uploaded documents and attachments, and you also want to have a PDF saved of the different steps that this went through. All that needs to save to Laserfiche, so you'd use the save to repository service task down here. I also use the workflow service task saying at this point, take some of the information from the form and kick off a workflow. So in this case, though, we want to route to a user. So what we do is we start connecting our lines. If you select it, you'll have the option to click and drag the arrows saying that when this is submitted, it's going to go here. Once submitted, and it can go to multiples. Now we need to create all of the connections for each one of these, even if it's not going to go down every single one. They still need to exist. And then once finished, they will need to go in here as well. I'm just dragging and dropping these arrows. So it should look something kind of like this. One thing that we may need to add is, of course, what if they hit reject? Well, if they reject, then of course we're going to need to have a different gateway. So this would be the acceptance gateway. Reject would be another, but we can cover that in a moment. So now we need to say who we're going to be routing each one of these to. So if we select that, we can say this one's going to be Jim. It's going to be a user. For testing purposes, if you ever want to set it up so you're routing it to yourself, you can use the initiator option down here as a user. So that's not a specific user, it's just whoever started it, it'll route directly to them. So a lot of times what I'll do is just have all of these be initiator, and then once we've tested and we've made sure that the form is ready to go, ready to deploy, that's when we'll go through and switch and then select the user from the database. In this case, if it was routing to me, there's my name because I'm a licensed user. You'll be able to select it and it'll find those in your database. So we're going to call this one Jim. We're going to route it to the initiator. We don't need to do anything with the emails or anything like that. But up here on the tab, we need to make sure we know which form we're sending Jim. There's only one here, so multiple approver test. And next, you'll see that there's the option to say approve, reject, or submit. These are the standard out of the box, ready to go buttons, but you can actually rename them whatever you want. So if it's approve or reject, but if you just want to say maybe like signed, exclamation point, you can do that. And that would be the button to show that, yes, I signed it, hit this, that says it's signed, and then it'll go down this path once signed. So we're just gonna do the same thing again. Call it Michael, send it to the initiator. Make sure that it's the correct form, signed, and then we'll do it one more time for Dwight. I'll even use a different button here. So now though, we need to say when it's going to go down each one of these. If I leave it as is, it's essentially going to act like a parallel gateway. It's going to go down all of these because there's nothing stopping it from going down any one of these. But what I want to do is change my properties here. And this is actually on the path itself. You'll notice it just has a name here, but we can click on a condition box. The condition box is what's going to tell it why or when it's going to go down this path. So if we choose our variable, you'll see that there's last action. That's a common one. That's like saying that the last action or the last user action was button reject or accept selected. But in this case, I'm looking more for my field variables, the actual fields on the form. So who needs to sign this? You'll notice it named my variable who underscore needs underscore etc. And who needs to sign this? If that Jim is selected, make sure you hit that insert, and that'll write your syntax for you. So then if we select this, we'll see it's going to go down this when Jim is checked. And then we do it again with this one. We'll say that Michael is selected. Make sure we hit insert. And lastly, also one Dwight. And the condition is Dwight is selected. If we publish that, we can actually hit this little play button and test it and see if it works. So if I say Jim needs to sign this and hit submit, close out of this, I should see a little notification that task Jim was assigned to me. And since we just have the exclusive gateway, if Jim signed this, we should get a notification that the entire process is complete now because it went through the inclusive gateway. It's not waiting on anybody else. Process March Consulting webinar was completed. So there you go. That's how that works. But let's go ahead and build on this some more because obviously we're going to need more than just having a checkbox filled out. A lot of times we're going to have variables like a certain dollar amount. If an expense reimbursement is over $1,000, you're probably going to want multiple supervisors to approve that or have it go through multiple, pass through multiple hands before it's approved. So let's go ahead and add a currency field, and we'll just call this one total. So if we have this total here, we can go ahead and save, and then go back to our layout. Back to our layout. And now we can start adjusting our rules. So let's say that there we go. There's our properties. I realize I didn't name this one either. Let's go ahead and call it Michael. Cannot spell that. So this one's already saying that the condition is if Michael is checked, go down this path. But let's go ahead and add something else to say or if total is greater than $100. And then save. And then publish. So now if we test this, and then we say it needs to go to Jim, and the total is 500, which is more than 100, and submit, it should go to Jim and Michael because we have that or operator in there saying that it needs to go down that path. So there we see task Michael and task Jim. So it went down both of those paths because of the conditions that we had in there. And if we just go to the Michael one, and say signed. That's not actually going to complete anything because it's still waiting on Jim. So you'll notice there's no notification, but once we go in there and have Jim sign it, that's when we'll get the notification that the process is completed because it went through all the different paths. All right, I actually saw a question pop in here, so I'm just going to take a look at this quick. And everything's really tiny. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, so number one, for the inclusive gateway, does the default path always get triggered, even if other parameters are met? The default path is just saying that if nothing else, try this path. Like that's going to be the first one it tries. A default path can still not be satisfied, not actually be taken if you have the criteria set up. So for example, in this case, the default path is this because there's really only one. So that's just designating the default path, and that's where it's going to kind of follow unless there's something that's going to obstruct it, like a parameter. No, there's not a handout for this webinar. I'm not sure what the handout would be. I suppose the one slide. If you want that slide, email me afterwards, and I can send that one slide to you. How does the final approval know to wait until any of the 4 approvals has been completed? And that is just part of the inclusive gateway. That's saying that do not go down this gateway until all the others are met. Now, I want to say that if you wanted to send it through without that, you would just basically take this off and say that once this is completed, if we remove the gateway and just throw in an end event, then basically whoever signs it first would let it end. The gateway is what stops it and kind of puts like I don't know, I guess kind of like a dam to hold back the flow. If we were to publish this and then try it again without the bookend, give it to everybody, hit submit, should see 3. Well, I just see the 2. But let's go ahead and have Michael go in and sign this. See what happens. Task Jim. And process completed. I'm wondering why it didn't go down this path though, because we didn't save our condition, it looks like. Okay. So I think in order to, I guess if everything is converging on the same path, it's going to kind of default to wait until it's completed, or at least that's what this one did. Now I feel like I'm going to need to look into that a little bit more because all the ones that I built, I always bookended it with the inclusive gateway. But you can always set up separate paths for each one of these. So once Jim finishes it, if it doesn't merge into the common gateway with everybody else. Oh, actually, I know why that is. So yeah, this would go through and it would end, but it's not going to necessarily terminate the entire thing once it ends. If we were to add the terminate event, that would kill the entire process. But in this case, it's saying it's still active because not everybody has completed that. So a way to look at that also, and this is going to be an important lesson too. Let's go ahead, save, publish, hit play. We'll choose Jim and Michael again. We see our 2 options. And let's go ahead and have Michael sign it again. And then if we go to the monitor option, we can select our process, and I'm going to find the March consulting webinar, hit search. And this is showing all that are completed. Why is that? Oh, so I was right the first time. It did complete with just that one individual signing it. So if we go through and look at this, we'll see that it went to, that makes way more sense. I thought I was going crazy. So yeah, we hit start. We sent it to Jim and Michael. We didn't bookend it with the inclusive gateway. And so once Michael approved it, it ended. And so now it's showing it as complete. So the inclusive gateway is waiting for everyone else to finish it, and then it's moving forward. All right. If I have time, can I demo email approvals? Yes, I think so. Let me try, although I haven't tried it with this, so we'll see how this goes. Since this is the cloud, it might be set up and conducive to do that. Let's go back to our design. So let's go ahead and say the Dwight path, it's actually going to be, I guess I could have kept that actually. So we're going to call this the Stephen path. And we're going to route it to Stephen. And we're going to email the user when this task is assigned. And the form is going to be same one, signed. Oops, cancel. And this one's going to say though that the who needs to sign this, Dwight is selected. No, wait, let's do this. The total is greater than 100. Save. Now I'm not sure if I have the setup. I didn't plan to show this, so we're going to see how this goes. But I'm hoping that since I'm a user and because my email's in there, it's going to allow me to do that. So let's just kind of see what happens. This is the most exciting part of my entire day. All right, so we'll make it $1,000. It went to so it went to Stephen. Let me check my email. So I just clicked on my email and it just opened it up from within the email. So there's an email notification that opened it right up. So that's kind of one way to look at it, but you'll notice that it looks very similar to the other one as well. A better way of looking at this might be, there are ways to make it so it appears on the email. That's not something I have ready to go. Similarly, I don't have it up and necessarily ready to go on my cell phone either, but if you want to see what that looks like, that's something I may be able to look into. Actually, I think there might be a Laserfiche mobile video out there that I did where I showed what that actually looks like. But I just clicked on an email that was sent to me and I opened this up, and so I can hit the sign button and that sends it back through. So very similar on the email side. And the email can say whatever you want and kind of look however you want as well. So the reason I didn't use exclusive gateways for path, like in the first example, is because I wanted to show how we could have multiple. So the exclusive gateway will say that it's only going to go to Jim, it's only going to go to Michael, and the first time it's satisfied, it's going to go to that one individual. It's exclusively going to one path. Inclusive means multiple. And last question, what version of Forms am I using? This is Laserfiche Cloud. So this is, right now, I think it's on 11 now. But Cloud kind of has its own rules, its own, and before you guys go crazy and think that maybe I need to throw out my entire instance and we need to move to Cloud, I would want you to meet with your VAR or meet with somebody to go ahead and audit your workflows, audit your forms process, look how you're using the system already. Because although the cloud is great, it does have its limitations, and not everything is available in the cloud yet, especially if you're using integrations with things like DocuSign or Salesforce or Redtail or anything else. So my recommendation is, if you're interested in moving to the cloud, you want to explore that, we can certainly get you in touch with somebody, but you'll want to make sure you're not sacrificing or giving anything up when it comes to functionality. So that's just my little caveat. So that's how we can have multiple approvals. If we wanted to finish this whole thing up and say save to repository, we could add that in here and say that once it's completed, of course, where are these going? I would want to add my inclusive gateway again. If you guys are taking screenshots, this is the screenshot I would want you to take, is what this looks like, and know that each one of these fields has its own rules. Once it completes, before it just ends, it would save this to Laserfiche. It's a common one. You'll need to have a profile that can actually save to this. We've seen this issue come up before, that it's going to be using the Laserfiche Forms default user to authenticate and save files to Laserfiche. So if you're using maybe a Laserfiche Forms service account, you'll need to make sure that Laserfiche Forms has access to the folder that it's trying to save to. Otherwise, it's going to fail and it's going to stop. Similarly, if you're adding a, let's check something here quick. So it's going to save to a specific folder and allow you to kind of come in here and see where it's going. I usually send it to incoming scans and let it file from workflow. Also, most of the situations I've been in, people haven't been too terribly careful with the security on Laserfiche templates, but you can add stipulations on Laserfiche templates and fields and restrict them. So you want to also make sure that the Laserfiche Forms user does have the ability to assign that specific template and assign those fields and all of that as well, if you are in fact assigning like a client document. So from here you can say, all right, save this, save a PDF of the process we just did, save a PDF version of this form, and take the, who needs to sign this, Michael, make sure that first name is added here, and make sure the email is, and then so on and so forth. And it'll assign that as metadata to the file that gets saved to Laserfiche. Oh, the exclusive gateways were set after the approvals for the second inclusive. And just wondering what the 4 extra exclusive gateways were for. Yes, okay, I'm following you now. Yeah, let's go ahead and pop back over that and I'll talk through that piece, because you're right, that was a little more involved piece. And the reason for that was I was adding the option of reject. So this is like an approve or reject. Each one of those approvers needs to have its own separate gateway that if they approve it, sure, send it down to that next inclusive gateway. But if they say no and they reject it, then it needs to go someplace else. So that's the high level reason for it. But I'll go ahead and give you a visual component here as well. Right, yes, okay. So in this situation, you check John. John needs to sign this. It goes down into the inclusive gateway, and it only is satisfied down the John pathway. Gets assigned to John. John has the option to either approve or deny this. So when John says reject or deny this, it's going to go into the inclusive gateway, or exclusive gateway rather. And then there are actually two, I won't save this, but just so you can see this, this might be, no, it's not going to work. If he rejects it, it's going to go down to this, and it's going to do a terminate end event where it's just going to finish the entire process out and say it's done. If he approves it, then it's going to go in and wait in that inclusive gateway for the others to approve it, in which case no one else needs to. So they'll go down through that. Just to show you quick, let's go ahead and say that. John, submit. Task John assigned to me, reject. So then if we go to our monitor and we search for our business process, multiple approvals, search, see the most recent at 311. Is it not finished yet? Well, it's showing it terminated, so we should see something. Yeah, so it went down that path, he rejected it, and it ran here and terminated the whole thing. Yeah, happy to. Okay, so what is the importance of putting the save and end tasks in the different stage? If I'm following you correctly, I mean, ultimately, this is going to depend on what your business process looks like. I always recommend whiteboarding this first, but the save to Laserfiche should really probably be at the very end, but not at the actual end. You have to have an end event at the end of the whole thing. That's what says that this is completed and it's completed without any errors. So you need to save it before you end it. If you end it and then try and save something afterwards, it's not going to get there. Anything after end doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. No, this is not part of just version 11. This is available in all versions of Forms. You can always view this business process diagram, and I don't even think they even added any extra options either. I take that back. There is one difference. So let me go back in here quick. You may not be able to see it if you don't have the Forms administrative rights. You want to make sure that you're logging in as someone who can actually design and deploy and create forms. Otherwise, you're going to have a limited view. So that might have something to do with it. So multiple approvers. The only thing that's different in the cloud, and I think it's only the cloud, is this rules service task. And that's because rules are unique to the cloud. So if we were to open up Laserfiche forms on the desktop client, you probably wouldn't see that option, but you would still have the email, saved repository, the workflow, the user task, the sub-process option, and all of the different throws and catches and end events and start events and gateways should all be consistent. Oh, are you talking about these stages here? I mean, those have just kind of always been there. You can insert or remove them. It might have something to do with your view or your settings. But no, these have always been there as well. If you have 10.4, then they certainly should be there. Are you zoomed in? Like, do you just need to scroll up? No, that shouldn't have anything to do with it. I would have to look. It might be a settings thing. I don't use them very often. I think I did when I first started, but I don't find them all that helpful unless I'm in a very, very, very large forms process. And even then, usually it goes across multiple forms, across multiple processes, multiple workflows, things like that as well. So I haven't found them that helpful. But I would say look at your settings and maybe check the Laserfiche help page or Laserfiche answers, which actually is a good segue. These are some of the main resources that I use. Laserfiche Answers, a great way to get to that is to Google Laserfiche questions, and the top answer is almost always something posted in Laserfiche Answers, which is the Laserfiche community forum. There's also the Laserfiche Solution Exchange, and of course laserfiche.com/support. If you have any questions, these are a great place to start. Another one would be, of course, the Laserfiche help page, which I think you can access from the Laserfiche application itself too. My only complaint about that is it's not super intuitive. It does take a little while for me to find the answers I need, but everything is in there. It's just because it's so comprehensive. Lastly, if you want to reach out to us to have some one-on-one time or just kind of walk through this process, or just have like a quick Q&A, or if you've got ideas for a project where you want to incorporate what you saw here, you can email us at consulting@citiesdigital.com for any actual consulting time. Chances are you'll get me or one of our other consultants, or sales at Cities Digital if you're looking to add things on. So for example, if you want to start exploring what Laserfiche Cloud could look like in your organization, what the differences are when it comes to price, functionality, etc., I would say send an email out to sales@citiesdigital.com. You can keep it short. Just let them know who you are, what you want to talk about, and somebody will reach out to you pretty quick. With that too, you can always email me at stevencruisefelt at, I actually use stevencruisefelt@citiesdigital.com, but maybe that one goes to the same one. I've never really noticed that before. Steven.cruisefelt@citiesdigital.com is how you can reach me directly. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, time permitting, of course. And also remember that this was recorded and should be up and available on our YouTube channel by next week at the latest. Thanks everybody for your great questions. I'm glad this was interactive. So Thomas, you're invited back every single time. It was great. Gracie, thank you as well. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to the next time. Bye.